Hi, this is Nicholas Yock, a registered migration and education agent from Pathway to Oz. Pathway to Oz provides migration and education information to help you plan your journey to permanent residency in Australia. Look guys, so this video outlines the employer-sponsored pathway to permanent residency for temporary graduate visa holders. So anyone who's really graduated the course and wants to go that employer-sponsored pathway, this could be for you. There are separate videos that outline the general skilled migration pathway. This is specifically for the employer-sponsored pathway for recent graduates. So look guys, the most beneficial thing about the temporary graduate visa is that it allows you time to remain in Australia to live, work and build up your experience once you have finished your studies. It gives you time to both find an employer that is open to sponsoring your visa and build up the work experience requirements required to be sponsored. All right, so there are several different types of employer-sponsored visas in Australia. The temporary employer-sponsored Subclass 482, the permanent employer-sponsored Subclass 186, and the temporary skilled regional employer-sponsored, that's a mouthful, Subclass 494. I have individual videos on each of these visas, so please check them out if you want a little more detail. However, in a very brief overview, for a temporary employer-sponsored visa is the most likely employer-sponsored visa after a graduate visa. This visa requires you to hold a relevant qualification and have 2 years of relevant skilled employment. Applicants should be able to build up this 2 years of work experience on the grad visa. If you can't build up 2 years of work experience, you could potentially look at going for a training visa. The permanent employer-sponsored visa requires applicants to have 3 years of full-time post-qualification work experience and a full skill assessment in your occupation on the medium to long-term list. Okay, so not every occupation, if it's not on the medium to long-term list, you don't have a pathway to PR through the employer sponsorship. So in addition to this, because you need 3 years of full-time post-qualification work experience, you likely won't be able to build this experience up on just the graduate visa. Therefore, a very common pathway for us, if applicants are going to look to go the employer-sponsored pathway, is to go the temporary employer-sponsored visa, Subclass 482, and then the permanent employer-sponsored visa, Subclass 186. Now guys, look, in my opinion, general skilled migration visas are much preferable to employer-sponsored visas. On the general skilled migration visas, you're not tied to an employer. The 189 and 190 are permanent immediately, and you can just apply directly for these. So in what scenario is employer sponsorship a good pathway for graduates? All right, so as discussed, general skilled migration is a much better pathway in my opinion. But in very certain situations, I'd recommend looking to go down in the employer-sponsored visa pathway. And that is if you live in a major city such as Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne, and you work in an occupation on the medium to long-term list, and you can't receive state nomination for the 190. So in almost every other situation, you're better off going for general skilled migration. So please note, this information is very general. That's just my opinion for 99% of clients. So guys, an example of one of our clients who actually went down the employer-sponsored pathways for permanent residency was a guy who studied carpentry and he lived and worked in Melbourne. So he graduated from his studies, he liked his employer, it was a stable relationship with good employment. He actually couldn't get invited for the state nominated visa. Couldn't get enough points or just didn't receive an invite as it wasn't on the list. Prior to the applicant's graduate visa expiring, we applied for the temporary employer-sponsored 482 visa. This gave him enough time to then build up the 3 years of full-time post-qualification work experience. As soon as he did that, we applied for the permanent employer-sponsored 186. And that, now he's a permanent resident of Australia, living and working in his occupation in Melbourne. So, there's limited circumstances where I think it's worthwhile going down the employer-sponsored pathway, but in most cases it's not. The information I gave you guys is very general in nature. I would always recommend chatting with a migration agent to check your specific circumstances and find a migration pathway that's right for you. Thank you.